Hi, everybody. I'm Bryan Mudd, a fan of South Plains politics. Here's your talking points for this week. And this week, a special edition of the show. We're recapping the primary election, including some races that may not be finished yet.
From the studios of KMAC Television in Lubbock, your local election headquarters. This is Talking Points with Bryan Mudd.
Thanks for joining us, everybody. Also this week, participation awards. The 2020 primary elections were nothing if not a little bit weird, at least in Lubbock County. Most of the races turned out the way we figured, others not so much. As always, it was decided by who decided to participate and vote, because no matter how many commercials you make or hands you shake, if your people don't show up to vote, you don't win. If we're reading all the numbers right, here's the voting numbers from Lubbock County. Despite over 21,000 additional registered voters in 2020, the overall voting numbers were down over 9% from the 2016 primary. Total number of Democrats participating actually up a bit. Republicans stayed home, down over 10.5%. Oh, yeah, but Mudd, who cares? Trump, Corn, and Arrington were all going to win easily anyway. I'll stumble into a voting booth in November, so no big deal, right? Well, tell that to Lubbock attorney Larry Doss, appointed by the governor to serve as justice for the 7th Court of Appeals, and now running to keep the job, but low numbers in Lubbock, and now Doss finds himself 319 votes behind Amarillo attorney Stephen Denny. Amarillo voting numbers were up, as they were in most of the rest of the state. So you see how this works? But Doss may have a way out thanks to a mistake. That race between Doss and Denny should have appeared on ballots in Cochran and Collingsworth counties, but when folks there went to vote, it wasn't there. So far, no one's admitting any responsibility, and Mr. Doss is likely weighing whether or not to take all of this now to court. And is this race for Lubbock County Commissioner in Precinct 1 over? Political newcomer Terrence Kovar avoids a runoff with former Lubbock City Manager Leanne Dumbold by just 2 votes. And there are some mail-in and provisional ballots still to be put in play here. We should have that on Monday. And Ms. Dumbold could ask for a recount even to see if she can get into a runoff, but we're told that would cost her about $3,800. For right now, Mr. Kovar is the new commissioner for Precinct 1.
There's a lot to do in Lubbock County. You can't just say one thing. I mean, the Sheriff's Department, they're looking into new ways to get rid of prisoners because they're staying too long without having to add on to the jail. And so everything's going to take time and money. And so we've got to get in there and work with the other commissioners. There'll be a total of 5 of us, and so we all need to agree on the best way and the most cost-effective way to take care of these problems. I'm the outsider looking in, and so people didn't think I'd make it this far. And it's exciting to prove them wrong.
Won't be a runoff there. No runoff for the commissioner race in Precinct 3 either. The winner is another political newcomer. Congrats to farmer and fence business owner Carrie Shaw, whose ever-present overalls and ideas resonated with voters. And he'll face off with a familiar politician in November, the incumbent Democrat Gilbert Flores, who held off yet another challenge from familiar opponent Bubba Cedeno. Interesting. The higher Texas turnout in other parts of the state really shaping the national presidential race. But here, it was Bernie Sanders edging Joe Biden among Democrats, which is kind of hard to believe. You know, it was, of course, Mr. Biden winning Texas overall and taking 111 of the available delegates. Sanders not far behind, gets 102 delegates. But it was Biden on Tuesday that thinned the entire field and changed the race, as KMAC's Wes Rappaport tells us from Austin.
Hi there. With more than 200 delegates on the line here in the Lone Star State, in a tight race, it was Joe Biden who pulled ahead.
The working assumption right now is that Joe Biden is the strongest competitor against Donald Trump. I think that's why you've seen a number of Democratic elected officials, including people who've recently dropped out of the race, then turn around and endorse the former vice president, because there seems to be a belief that he's going to be the strongest come November against Trump.
This energy, if you follow what's happened over the previous cycles, it shows that Democrats are ready for change and they're fired up, and the lines are just one more example that in November is going to be huge for Texas and for Texas Democrats.
The Central Texas State House Democrats we talked to said high turnout in the suburbs may narrow the gap in the constant red state, blue state, purple state debate. In Austin, I'm Wes Rappaport. Back to you.
A pleasure to be joined once again by Dr. Seth McKee, Associate Professor of Political Science over at Texas Tech, helping us break down a little bit of what we saw here in and around Super Tuesday. It's good to see you, my friend.
Good to see you, too.
It's feeling more and more like it's going to be Biden and Bernie all the way to the convention here. You know, what does the endorsement by Biden by some of the other candidates really mean to Democratic voters, do you think? Does that matter?
I think it mattered a whole lot, and especially South Carolina, thinking of Congressman Jim Clyburn, African-American, who really sort of vaulted Biden back to life, and then just that, you know, crushing victory in South Carolina has propelled him into Super Tuesday. And Klobuchar and Buttigieg sort of did the right thing in the sense that, well, they're Democrats, he's a Democrat. They didn't see a path to victory, so they bailed and endorsed him in Dallas. I think that had a really big effect. I mean, one of the states that was a surprise tonight was Minnesota.
Yeah.
Massachusetts, too.
They said Biden didn't spend a dime in that state.
Yeah, it's just, it's all momentum. It's all sort of, this is the way the tide is flowing. I thought that Sanders would take Massachusetts over Warren. No, it's Biden.
No straight party voting anymore in Texas, which is normal in primaries anyway, obviously. But how do candidates at the bottom of the ballot, how are they going to keep people's attention as some of these races now move into runoffs and things of that nature?
Yeah, I mean, that's hard to do. I mean, it's, you know, you look at these and, you know, you look at Texas and you look at Republican, I mean, it's just sleepy stuff. I mean, it's not things that we follow. But I think on the Democratic side, it's really exciting when you think back to Beto. And you think about what he did for this modern Democratic Party in Texas. And my sense is that, you know, Biden, he's probably going to be the nominee in unless there's some strange shift, and I doubt that. And I think that Biden could take Texas in November. I think he could beat Trump.
Interesting. You know, and along those lines, I want to talk to you about a couple of results that we got from our KMAC and Emerson College polling, which is just polling mainly of Democratic and independent voters here. One, will President Trump be reelected? 69% of those statewide voters saying no. Is that realistically the only issue that rallies these voters to show up in November, when it really boils down to it?
I think it's the most important because of how polarizing this president has been. And I think that's one of the reasons Bernie's gotten as far as he got, is that there were so many people who thought that was a path to beat Trump. Now, Trump relished that because he thought that Bernie would be the easiest person to beat. And I don't think that scenario is going to play out for him. We know that impeachment, at the center of it, was Joe Biden. And strangely enough, down the road, it turns out that he's probably going to get Biden. And that's might be his worst nightmare.
We did ask voters about the issues they cared about in the U.S. Senate race, and it sort of reflects on the rest of this. 32% on health care, which is understandable with coronavirus talk right now. I thought the economy only being a 16% mark was interesting in that there are a lot of independent voters in this as well. I mean, that's going to be the president's bread and butter through the summer. Look at the positive economy we have, and the independents and moderate Democrats who may not like they're not interested in that kind of stuff.
Yeah, and this might change because we just don't know what the coronavirus is going to be like in terms of getting in, you know, months from now. The economy will go back to the fore, I think, but one of the problems that Trump's going to have in a place like Texas is this new Democratic coalition is very interesting because the lower class that's not Anglo is not going to vote for Trump. And then when you look at the upper class Anglos, they're breaking to the Democratic Party in Texas. The suburbs that used to be red, they're purple now, and they seem to be moving blue. And so when you think of people who are better off in this good economy, they're not really allies of Trump. And so it's pretty interesting.
I said this before, all those folks moving into Texas from California and other places, moving into the suburbs of the bigger cities, changing the way things are done politically in this state.
Absolutely, and that's why Beto got within a razor of taking out Cruz.
Well, West Texas is a big part of making sure the Cruz stayed in there.
So it absolutely did.
We'll see how our vote affects everything when we get in November. Seth McKee, good to see you again, my friend.
You too.
And no poll question this week. We'll get back to our regular format on next week's show. Still to come this week, more of Tuesday's winners. And we start to look ahead to the November general election. Democrat John Gibson will be on that ballot looking for a seat in the Texas House. He joins us for 5 good minutes next on Talking Points.